The day they buried my husband, my mother-in-law was already measuring my bedroom for new furniture. I saw her do it. Standing in the hallway, tape measure in hand, while I was still in my black dress, still smelling like the cemetery. She didn't see me watching. Nobody ever sees me watching. That was my first mistake in their eyes, marrying into this family without understanding one simple rule. In the Harrington family, you are either blood, or you are temporary. I was temporary. But what they didn't know, what none of them could have possibly imagined, was that for the past 6 months, I had been preparing for exactly this moment. My name is Claire. I was married to Daniel Harrington for 9 years. And this is the story of how his family tried to erase me from existence, and how I made sure they regretted every single second of it. When I first met Daniel, I thought his family was everything I never had. I grew up in foster care. No parents, no siblings, no holidays around a big dinner table. When Daniel brought me home for Christmas that first year, I cried in the bathroom because I didn't know families like this actually existed. His mother, Margaret, was elegant. Perfectly dressed, perfectly spoken. She kissed my cheek and said, "Any woman who makes my Daniel smile like that is welcome in this home." His father, Robert, shook my hand firmly and nodded with approval. His sister, Diana, showed me around the house like we were already best friends. I thought I had finally found my people. I was so naive. The first sign came 3 months after our wedding. Margaret called Daniel while I was sitting right next to him. I could hear her voice through the phone. She never spoke quietly. "She doesn't come from anywhere, Daniel. No family, no background, no money. What happens when the novelty wears off?" Daniel told her to stop. He defended me. And I loved him even more for it. But the calls kept coming. Every few months, a new concern from Margaret. "Claire isn't good enough. Claire doesn't fit in. Claire will never truly be one of us." Daniel always defended me. Always. Until he got sick. Daniel was diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma 18 months before he died. The moment that diagnosis came, something shifted in the Harrington family. Something cold and calculated that I could feel but couldn't quite see clearly yet. Margaret suddenly wanted to be involved in everything. She came to doctor's appointments. She started calling Daniel 3-4 times a day. She hired a private nurse, without asking me, and installed her in our guest room. "I'm just helping," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. "You must be so overwhelmed, dear." Robert started asking questions about finances. Casual questions, over dinner. "Daniel, have you updated your will recently? Things change, you know. It's responsible planning." Diana started being unusually sweet to me. Offering to help me with groceries, asking if I needed anything, showing up unannounced with casseroles. It felt less like kindness and more like someone keeping me busy. I noticed all of it. But I was too consumed with caring for my dying husband to fully process what I was seeing. Then came the night everything became clear. It was a Tuesday. Daniel had a bad day, the medication made him sick, and he'd finally fallen asleep around 10 p.m. I came downstairs to make tea. The kitchen light was off but the living room light was on. I could hear voices. Margaret, Robert, and Diana. They thought the house was silent. I stood in the dark hallway and I listened. "The house is in Daniel's name," Robert was saying. "When he passes, without a proper updated will, Claire could claim everything." "That cannot happen," Margaret said. Her voice was like ice. "This house has been in our family for 30 years. I am not letting some orphan girl with no last name walk away with it." "She won't even fight it," Diana said. "She has no family, no lawyer, no money of her own. We make it uncomfortable enough, she'll leave on her own." "And if she doesn't?" Robert asked. Silence. Then Margaret spoke. "Then we make sure the will is updated before it's too late. I already spoke to Gregory." Gregory was the family lawyer. "Daniel won't agree," Diana said quietly. "Daniel," Margaret said slowly, "is not well. He gets confused. He forgets things. It happens with the medication." I stood in that hallway and I felt something inside me go completely still. They were going to use my husband's illness to manipulate him. To change his will. To take everything. And then they were going to throw me out like I was nothing. I went back upstairs. I didn't make my tea. I sat beside Daniel while he slept and I made a decision. If they wanted a war, I would give them one. But I would fight it my way, in silence, with evidence, and with patience. The next morning, I called my own lawyer. Nobody knew I had one. I had quietly hired her 4 months earlier when I first started feeling uneasy about the family's behavior. Her name was Sandra Okafor, and she was the kind of woman who made opposing lawyers nervous just by walking into a room. I told Sandra everything I had heard. Every word. "Do you have any of this recorded?" she asked. I didn't. "Not yet." "Then we need to start documenting," she said. "Everything. From today." I went home and I bought 3 small audio recorders. One for the living room. One for the kitchen. One for the dining room, the places where the Harringtons like to have their important conversations. Was it legal in our state? Yes. One-party consent. As long as I was present in the home, and I was always present in my own home, I could record. I also did something else. I talked to Daniel. Not about his family. Not about what I had heard. He was fighting for his life and I refused to poison his remaining time with this ugliness. But I talked to him about us. About our future. About what he wanted. And one afternoon, when he was having a good day, I gently brought up his will. Baby, I said, I know this is hard to talk about. But I want to make sure your wishes are protected. I don't want there to be any confusion, for anyone, about what you want. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, my mother has been calling me about this. Asking me to come see Gregory. My heart stopped. What did you tell her? I asked carefully. I told her I'd think about it, he said. Then he took my hand. Claire. You know I would never leave you without protection. You know that, right? I know, I said. But let's make it official. Let's do it with our own lawyer. Someone who works for us. Daniel agreed. 3 weeks later, Daniel met with Sandra. I was not in the room, I wanted it to be purely his decision, with no one influencing him. Sandra told me later that he was sharp, clear, and completely certain about what he wanted. He left the house to me. A life insurance policy, to me. His personal savings, to me. His family would receive specific items he had chosen, his father's watch collection, his mother's pearl jewelry that had come from her own mother, and a generous financial sum. But the home we had built together? That was mine. He signed everything. Notarized. Witnessed by 2 independent witnesses Sandra brought herself. Margaret never got to Gregory in time. Daniel passed on a Thursday morning in March. Quietly, in our bedroom, with me holding his hand. I didn't cry at the hospital. I didn't cry at the funeral home. I cried alone, at 3 a.m., on the bathroom floor, where no one could see me and no one could use my grief against me. Because I knew what was coming. And I needed to be ready. The funeral was on a Saturday. 200 people came. Daniel was loved, genuinely, widely loved. I stood at the front and received condolences for 4 hours and I smiled and I thanked people and I held myself together with everything I had. And that evening, when the guests were gone and it was just family left in the house, I watched Margaret walk down the hallway toward the master bedroom with a tape measure. She came back and sat across from me in the living room. Claire, she said, folding her hands in her lap, I think we need to talk about the practicalities. Of course, I said. I kept my face open. Soft. Tired. This house, she began, it's really a family home. It's been in our family for decades. I think we can all agree that it wouldn't be appropriate for you to. Margaret, I said gently, I appreciate your concern. But I think we should let the lawyers handle everything. It's what Daniel would have wanted. She smiled. Patient. Certain. Of course, she said. Gregory will be in touch. I have my own lawyer, I said. Her name is Sandra Okafor. Please have Gregory contact her directly. Something flickered in Margaret's eyes. Just for a second. You have a lawyer, she repeated. Yes, I said. I've had her for several months. The room was very quiet. 2 weeks after the funeral, we sat across from each other in Sandra's conference room. Margaret, Robert, Diana, and Gregory on one side. Me and Sandra on the other. Gregory opened with confidence. He explained that Daniel had expressed wishes, verbally, to his mother, that the family home should remain in family hands. He explained that Claire, as someone with no biological connection to the Harrington family, should. Sandra slid a folder across the table. Daniel Harrington's legally executed will, she said. Signed 6 months ago. Notarized. Witnessed. Completely valid. Gregory opened it. His expression didn't change, he was a professional, but his eyes moved very quickly across the page. Margaret leaned over to look. And that was when I saw it, the first crack in her composure. Her jaw tightened. This can't be, she said quietly. It is, Sandra said simply. He was ill, Robert said, his voice rising slightly. He wasn't thinking clearly. The medication. I anticipated that concern, Sandra said. She slid another folder across the table. Affidavit from Daniel's oncologist, confirming that on the date the will was signed, Daniel Harrington was of completely sound mind. Also, statements from the 2 independent witnesses. Also, a video recording Daniel made himself that same day, speaking directly to the camera, explaining his wishes in his own words. Diana made a small sound. He recorded himself, she whispered. He wanted there to be no confusion, Sandra said. Margaret turned to look at me. For the first time since I had known her, she looked old. And something else, something I recognized because I had felt it myself, standing in that dark hallway 6 months ago. She looked afraid. Why, she said. Just that one word, directed at me. Why didn't you just come to us? I looked at her for a long moment. The night of Daniel's bad Tuesday, I said quietly, I came downstairs to make tea. The kitchen light was off. She went completely still. You were in the living room, I continued. You, Robert, Diana. You talked about the house. You talked about Gregory. You talked about using Daniel's medication and confusion to change his will. We never, Robert started. You said, I looked at him directly, Daniel is not well. He gets confused. He forgets things. It happens with the medication. Sandra placed a third folder on the table. Audio recording. Date and time stamped. Taken in the Harrington Mercer family home, in which my client is a legal resident. The room was absolutely silent. Margaret's hands were shaking slightly. I had never seen her hands shake before. I didn't come to you, I said, answering her question finally, because you were never going to listen to me. I was never going to be real to you. I was always temporary. I stood up. Daniel didn't think I was temporary. And that's the only opinion that ever mattered to me. Gregory quietly advised the Harrington family that contesting the will would be expensive, time-consuming, and, given the evidence Sandra had compiled, almost certainly unsuccessful. They did not contest the will. I kept the house. I kept the life insurance. I kept everything Daniel had wanted me to have. Margaret sent me a letter 3 months later. 4 pages, handwritten. It began as an explanation, moved into justification, and ended somewhere near an apology, though it never quite arrived there. She said she had always thought of the house as an extension of Daniel. She said she was afraid of losing the last piece of him. She said she didn't understand me and that frightened her. I read it twice. Then I put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Not because I was cruel. But because some things don't require a response. Some closure is only for you. Diana reached out 6 months later. A simple text, I'm sorry. I should have been better. You deserved better from us. I replied to Diana. We're not close. But we're not enemies either. Robert never reached out. Some people would rather be right than whole. I still live in the house. I repainted the bedroom, a soft blue that Daniel would have liked. I planted a garden in the backyard, something I always wanted and never had time for. I hung photos on the walls, not just of Daniel and me, but of the small life I'm slowly, quietly building for myself. I still have no family by blood. That hasn't changed. But I have Sandra, who checks in on me. I have neighbors who bring food on hard days. I have Daniel's memory, which I carry carefully, like something precious and irreplaceable. And I have the knowledge, the deep, settled, unshakable knowledge, that when they tried to erase me, I was already 3 steps ahead. Not because I'm ruthless. But because I learned something in all those years of having no one. The only person you can absolutely always count on to protect you, is you. And I protected myself. If you're sitting somewhere right now feeling invisible, feeling like someone is trying to write you out of your own story, I want you to hear this. Document everything. Speak to no one about your plans. Stay calm when they expect you to break. And trust that the truth, properly protected, will always outlast the lie. They thought I was easy to erase. They were wrong. And they knew at the moment Sandra slid that first folder across the table, and I watched 30 years of certainty drain from Margaret Harrington's face in a single second. That moment cost me everything to get to. It was worth every single second. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you're new here, welcome. My name is Lily. And I believe in justice, quiet, patient, devastating justice. Subscribe. Because there are more stories where this came from.